If you're a curious person and use Google a lot like I do, then there's a pretty high chance that you are familiar with Reddit.com. Reddit has been one of the most visited websites across the internet, providing insight to about any question or topic you can think of. But how did this website come to be, and why is it the first result to a majority of your online searches? Back in 2005, roommates Steve Huffman and Alexis Ohanian from the University of Pennsylvania would get in talks with Y Combinator founder Paul Graham. In these talks, the three men would come up with an idea for a community-driven news website, with the fate of each article determined by an anonymous voting system. With this idea in mind, the crew would receive $12,000 in funding from Y Combinator to help launch what they believed would be the next big thing, and they named it Reddit. Get it? It's Reddit because you read it? Yeah, but they weren't the only ones who believed in this idea, so later on they would be joined by Y Combinator graduate Aaron Swartz, and this is where they really began to build this website. Nearing the end of 2005, Reddit would add its own comment section so that users could voice their own opinions on what was being posted. They would even add what they called subreddits, which would divide and create sections for topics being posted, its biggest one that year being r/science and r/programming. But little did the team know some big changes were ahead of them. In October of 2006, the team would receive an offer from a company called Condé Nast, and they would offer to buy Reddit for around $15 million. Being the young men they were, they accepted the offer. Now the crew wasn't done just yet. In fact, by contract of the sale, they agreed to stay with the company for a minimum of 3 years. However, there was a bit of a problem. One of the three members didn't like the idea of being run by some big corporation. So in January of 2007, Aaron Swartz would be fired, for the reason being of poor attitude. Steve Huffman and Alexis Ohanian, however, would fulfill their contract and part ways from the company in 2009. But this wasn't the end of the website. Reddit would still grow, but not in a good way. In fact, the way it began to expand would become pretty problematic. At this time, they had run into a little bit of a problem. Being the anonymous-driven user base it was, it sadly became a breeding ground for hate speech. And this problem became massive, forcing them to actually remove some of its subreddits that fostered this hate speech. Some examples of these subreddits would be r/shoplifting, r/fatpeoplehate, and even, well, r/beating women. It even forced the stepping down of replacement CEO Yashang Wang after just 2 years, simply because operating the website became too stressful. Now, it wasn't just Yashang that would step down during these hard times. In fact, other employees would end up leaving as well, partly due to the same reason. Some employees would even receive backlash from the community, simply because they would take down hate speech related subreddits. At this time, Reddit was in shambles, and it was unsure whether or not the platform would stay in operation with these issues affecting the company. But it wasn't over for them just yet. In fact, what came next would change the direction of the company entirely. In 2015, following the recent departure of intern CEO Ellen Poe, one of Reddit's founding fathers, Steve Huffman, would make a return as CEO again, and this was huge. Upon his return, Huffman would make some major changes that would ultimately allow Reddit to expand more than ever. After resuming his position, Reddit would officially launch on iOS and Android app stores, and even undergo major redesigns across its website and its mobile interface. They would even add new features like the ability to hide posts, comments, and even private messages from other Redditors. Content guidelines would also be implemented to address issues like online harassment, inciting violence, and overall just keeping the website civil. In 2017, the company would raise $200 million in support of Reddit's redesign, and the platform would even be valued at nearly $1.8 billion. But it didn't end there. After the course of a few years, Reddit would even begin to acquire other companies following its massive growth. Some big ones being short-form video platform Dubsmash in 2020 and Spiketrap in 2022. Just 2 years later, Reddit would even announce its partnership with Google AI for around $60 million a year in February of 2024. Ultimately, when it came to Reddit's growth, they had a pretty unique story, from being one of the most problematic of its time to becoming one of the most used websites across the internet. But that's it for this video. If you liked it, feel free to subscribe, and yeah, peace.